My name is Isabella Rossi, but the people who trust me with their business just call me Bella. On the 10th of July, 2025, I learned exactly how dangerous it is when an entitled child who thinks human relationships can be automated is given the keys to a $160 million kingdom. My work is not sales. It is architecture. I don't build with steel or glass. I build with trust, empathy, and strategic foresight. At CloudForge, a leading software-as-a-service company, my official title was Head of Enterprise Clients. My real job was to be the human API for our 5 most important partners. They were the pillars that held up our entire company, representing 80% of our revenue. I didn't just manage their accounts. I understood their ecosystems, their fears, their ambitions. I built an entire system around this philosophy. I called it the Relationship Intelligence Platform. It wasn't just a CRM. It was my war room. One entire wall of my office was a smart glass display, bathed in a cool, low light from the silent hum of the processing units below. It showed a living map of our key clients. It wasn't just contact names and quarterly earnings. It was a complex web of psychological profiles, business cycle predictions, and personal connection points. I could bring up David Kumar's profile at Global Dynamics. It showed not just his company's stock performance, but also a sentiment analysis of his recent interviews, flagging a new focus on sustainable tech. A note I'd made 6 months ago popped up. David's daughter is a climate activist at Berkeley. This wasn't spying, it was listening on a massive scale. It was about understanding the human beings behind the corporate logos. I remember presenting my predictive model to the board. I showed them how, 6 months prior, the platform flagged a potential risk with TechCorp. Their usage metrics had shifted slightly, and my system correlated that with industry news about a new competitor. I knew their CEO, Sarah Chen, a risk-averse leader, would be getting nervous. So I didn't send a sales team with a discount offer. I personally arranged a private briefing for her with a leading cybersecurity expert, addressing her unstated fears before she ever had a chance to take a call from our competition. We secured a 5-year contract extension the following month. The board members looked at my 8-year client retention rate, a number that was a statistical impossibility in our industry, and they marveled. Dennis Vance Jr., son of our founder, was not in that meeting. I later heard he dismissed my work as emotional manipulation theatre. He was half right. He just didn't understand who was being emotional and who was the manipulator. That night, I went home to my small studio apartment. The evidence of my dedication was everywhere, a silent testament to the life I had chosen. On the coffee table, next to a stack of market analysis reports, lay a set of unsigned divorce papers. I remembered our last argument, my ex-husband's words sharp with a pain I couldn't soothe. He said, "I can't compete with a crisis in Tokyo, Bella. I'm not a line item on your risk assessment." He was right. Tucked into a drawer was an offer letter to become a vice president at Microsoft with a $2 million salary. Microsoft was a perfect, finished machine. CloudForge was a living thing I had raised from infancy. Leaving it would have felt like abandoning my own child. I had turned it down without a second thought. Propped against my bookshelf was a framed photo from my father's funeral. I had missed it. I watched the service on a grainy video call from a hotel room in Tokyo, closing the deal with Meridian Systems after a 20-hour crisis negotiation. The deal I closed saved our biggest client, but it cost me the chance to say goodbye. A part of me never forgave the company for that choice I felt I had to make. I had sacrificed everything for CloudForge, for the intricate, beautiful machine of trust I had built. As I was working late to finalize the Global Dynamics contract renewal, a notification popped up on my second monitor. It was a social media post from Dennis Vance Jr. He was on a yacht in the Hamptons, grinning, a bottle of champagne in his hand. The caption read, "Optimizing from afar." The irony was so thick I could taste it. A week later, our founder, Marcus Vance, announced his son's appointment as the new Chief Revenue Officer. Dennis stood before us in the main boardroom, radiating the smug energy of a man who had never earned anything in his life. He presented his masterpiece, a slide deck titled Human Capital Optimization Strategy. He spoke of synergy, of leveraging automation, of streamlining our client funnels. He said, "We will be actionizing a paradigm shift in client-facing synergy, leveraging AI to de-friction the communication pipeline." Then he announced his plan to replace my entire relationship management department with a new AI-powered chatbot system. He referred to my clients, the people I had spent nearly a decade understanding, as revenue units requiring efficiency. The other executives shifted uncomfortably in their seats. I asked him a simple question. I said, "Dennis, can you tell me the single biggest challenge facing Global Dynamics in the next quarter?" He stared at me, his eyes blank. He couldn't. I asked another, "What is Sarah Chen's biggest personal and professional goal for the next 2 years?" He blinked. He had no idea she was trying to get her company on the Fortune 50 list. He saw a revenue unit, not a person with ambition. He knew nothing about the people who paid all of our salaries. What he also didn't know was that I had spent years preparing for a moment just like this. My true genius wasn't just in managing relationships. It was in understanding contracts. Years ago, I had worked with our legal team to embed a specific, overlooked clause in the master service agreements for my 5 key clients. I had framed it as service quality assurance, a guarantee. It was called the Personal Manager Continuity Clause. It stipulated that if I, Isabella Rossi, ever ceased to be their designated personal manager, the client had the right to terminate their contract without penalty, with just 30 days' notice. I remember the in-house counsel at the time, a young man named Ben, reading the clause. He looked up at me, his eyes wide. He said, "Bella, this clause gives you everything." I just smiled. I said, "No, Ben, it gives the client a choice." The executives had forgotten about it. The lawyers saw it as boilerplate, but I knew it was a time bomb, hidden in plain sight, waiting for an arrogant fool to trip the wire. The public execution took place at the monthly sales meeting. All 35 members of the sales team were there, sipping cheap coffee in a windowless room. Dennis stood at the front, pacing like a discount motivational speaker. He talked about a new era of data-driven, automated customer success. He said my approach was based on antiquated analog concepts like intuition and trust. The future, he declared, was a frictionless, data-pure experience. He made it sound like I was a blacksmith arguing against the assembly line. Then he stopped and looked at me. He said, "Bella, your emotional approach has been valuable in the past, but it is a relic of the pre-digital era. We are moving forward. As of today, your position is redundant." The entire room fell silent. He announced that the new AI chatbot would be taking over all Tier 1 client communications. I maintained perfect, calm dignity. I simply said, "I understand. I will need a few moments to fulfill my contractual obligation to notify my clients of the change in management." He waved his hand, dismissing my concern as a petty formality. "Of course," he said. "Do what you have to do." I stood up, packed my laptop, and walked out of the room. As soon as I reached the parking lot, I sat in my car and made 5 precise phone calls. I wasn't emotional. I was a strategist executing a planned contingency. I called Sarah Chen at TechCorp. I informed her professionally and calmly that I was no longer with CloudForge and that her new point of contact would be an automated system. There was a long silence on the other end of the line. Then she said, "He's replacing you with a what? A chatbot? Does he have any idea how our integration works?" I told her to check Section 7, subsection B of her contract. My next call was to David Kumar at Global Dynamics. His reaction was faster, more strategic. He said, "Bella, this is the final piece of data I needed. Their leadership is unstable. We're out. I'm calling my legal team right now." Inside the building, Dennis was probably celebrating his premature victory, toasting the dawn of his new efficient empire. He had no idea I had just pulled the pin on 5 grenades and rolled them right into his boardroom. The next day, the automation disaster began. My former clients, the CEOs of 5 of the largest tech firms in the country, received their first automated email. It was a generic, soulless message addressing them by their first name and asking them to rate their customer satisfaction on a scale of 1 to 10. A client with a critical server down issue got a response from the chatbot that read, "I'm sorry you're having trouble. Have you tried turning it off and on again?" The CEO of Tech Corp, Sarah Chen, called Dennis directly. I later heard a recording of the call. She asked, "Where's Bella? I have a strategic question." Dennis, in his infinite wisdom, tried to direct her to the new chatbot interface. Sarah, a woman who commanded a $50 billion company, simply said, "I don't talk to robots," and hung up. The CTO of Meridian Systems sent a one-line email to Dennis. It read, "We don't do business with chatbots." Dennis was shocked. He couldn't comprehend why his clients, his revenue units, would prefer a human being to a perfectly efficient algorithm. On days 2 and 3, the contract activations began. Formal legal notices started arriving by courier. Global Dynamics was the first to activate their termination clause. Tech Corp and Meridian Systems followed within hours. Dennis, in a panic, finally had someone from legal pull the contracts. I can only imagine the look on his face as he finally read Section 7, subsection B, and understood the elegant, ironclad legal trap I had set for him years ago. He stormed through the office, yelling at the legal team, "What do you mean we can't sue them? What's the point of a contract if they can just leave?" On days 4 and 5, the cascade accelerated. Apex Solutions and Innovation Labs, my other 2 clients, terminated their contracts. In 5 days, CloudForge had lost 80% of its revenue. I watched the CloudForge stock ticker on a news channel. It was a red waterfall. Every time a new termination was announced, another cliff appeared. It was the market rendering its judgment on incompetence. The media storm began. TechCrunch ran a headline that read, "CloudForge loses 80% revenue in 5 days after firing star executive." A Forbes columnist wrote, "CloudForge has committed the cardinal sin of the service industry. They forgot who they serve." My name was everywhere. Clients gave public statements, blaming the company's new, quote, "dehumanization of service." Industry analysts began to openly question the competence of CloudForge's new leadership. Dennis Vance Jr. became a cautionary tale in the business media, a symbol of entitled nepotism before the week was even over. The emergency board meeting was a bloodbath. The company, which a week ago had been a Wall Street darling, was now facing bankruptcy. The legal counsel confirmed that my contracts were ironclad, and there was nothing they could do. The board, in a unanimous vote, demanded Dennis's immediate resignation. The chairman told him, "You didn't just lose clients, you idiot. You lost the entire company. She was the company." Dennis was stripped of all his positions, his stock options, and his future. He had destroyed a billion-dollar enterprise in less than a week. His father, Marcus Vance, flew back from Europe to find his company in ruins. I was told the confrontation in the founder's private office was apocalyptic. Marcus, a man who had built his empire on handshakes and personal integrity, had to face the fact that his son had destroyed his legacy by treating those very principles with contempt. He shouted, "I built this company with my bare hands, on my word. I built it on the idea that our clients were our partners. You took 30 years of my life's work, my name, and you burned it to the ground in 5 days because you were too arrogant to listen." Dennis was disowned, cast out from the family business empire he had so arrogantly tried to command. The next evening, my doorbell rang. It was Marcus Vance. He stood there looking older and smaller than I had ever seen him. He was on my turf now, a world away from his corporate boardroom. He had not come to argue. He had come to beg. He offered me my old job back. He offered me a raise. I let him finish. Then I told him my terms. I would return, but not as an employee. I would return as executive partner with 25% equity in the company and full autonomous control over the entire commercial division. And my final condition was that his son, Dennis, was to be permanently banned from ever setting foot in the company again. He started to weakly negotiate. He said, "Bella, 25%. I cut him off calmly. "Marcus, you are here because your company is worth 0 without me. This is not a negotiation. It is a surrender." He knew he had no choice. As he was agreeing to everything, my phone buzzed. It was a text from Sarah Chen at TechCorp. It said, "Dinner tonight?" I showed the message to Marcus. I said, "I have to take this. Sarah and I have a lot to discuss about our new partnership." The look of dawning hope on his face told me he finally understood. The relationships were never with the company. They were with me. Under my new leadership, we restored the company. All 5 clients returned, signing new, improved multi-year contracts. Our revenue grew to $350 million as our clients, now more loyal than ever, increased their spending. I implemented a company-wide relationship intelligence training program. I personally mentored 15 young women in the art of enterprise sales, teaching them that empathy is not a soft skill. It is a strategic weapon. And Dennis? His professional damnation was poetic. I heard about his new job from a contact in the industry. The company he works for in Nebraska makes customer service software, Chatbots. His title is Junior Product Implementation Specialist. He is not allowed to speak to clients. His entire job is to write the scripts for the very machines he thought could replace me. He spends his days trying to simulate the human empathy he so proudly dismissed, a ghost in the machine he once championed, forced to build cheap imitations of the very thing he failed to understand, and so carelessly destroyed. Last year, I gave the keynote speech at the National Sales Leadership Conference. It was a TED talk on the topic of human intelligence versus automation. The Harvard Business Review did a cover story on my methodology a month later. The title was The Rossi Doctrine: How Relationship Intelligence Became the New ROI. My victory was not just personal. It was a validation of a philosophy. I looked at the 15 young women in my mentorship program, and I thought about the funeral I missed, the marriage that ended. The cost was high. But I had not only rebuilt a company, I had built a new philosophy. I had proven that the most powerful force in business isn't automation or optimization. It's human connection. And for the first time, the price I paid felt worth it.